This week on Quality Digest Live, can better metrology practices help unravel the truth behind climate change?
Plus, we talk to industry icon Jim Harrington about China and quality. That and more when we come back.
Welcome back to Quality Digest Live for October 7th, 2011. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Dirk Ducharme, Editor-in-Chief of Quality Digest.
And I'm publisher Mike Richmond. Well, in a few moments we're going to be talking to quality guru Jim Harrington about China and quality. And we encourage you to please write us right now. Send us email to qdl@qualitydigest.com and let us know if you have any questions for Jim. If you've read his article on Chinese manufacturing, check that out and send us some comments. Again, qdl@qualitydigest.com. Send them now. We'll get them on the air later when we bring Jim on in about 10 minutes.
That's right. This is your chance to ask questions directly of Jim Harrington. He spent a lot of time in China. So if you get your questions in now, we'll be able to ask them of Jim, and rather than our questions.
That's right.
We want your questions to go to Jim. That's right.
So write in, please. Well, Chinese manufacturing, of course, is a key issue in our industry. Another important and somewhat related topic is that of climate change. Now, we addressed that subject this week with the article Metrology in the Hot Seat, written by our own Ryan Day in Wednesday's issue of Quality Digest Daily. Well, this, as you could well imagine, is a somewhat controversial article written by Ryan. And what I liked, Dirk, about this piece was that it was very well researched. You know, you'll see citations in this article from, 20 or more sources, I believe, looking at climate change, looking at metrology and the way that the measurement sciences have been used to look at this issue. And Ryan's approach was really one to look at it without any bias, without any point of view other than to say, well, let's look at what the science really says. We have these measurement tools available in today, and we can look at this dispassionately and look at what the research says and look at the methodology behind a lot of this research and a lot of the data that was acquired and how it was used and what it means. So what I liked about this was that we tried to kind of take the temperature down a little bit, so to speak, and take the passions and the emotions out of it and really look at it from the measurement perspective. And again, very well cited article. I encourage anyone out there watching the show now, if you haven't read the article, definitely read it, Metrology in the Hot Seat. Again, it was published in Quality Digest a few days ago, and it's on our website now, and it's at the bottom of the player now too, where you can click over and check that out. Now, again, this is a as we've talked about many times, we talk about this on the show and in QDD that climate change touches on quality in many ways. It really touches on the function of what many people, many of our viewers and our readers are doing out there. Whether you believe in climate change or not, and this is a key point, wherever you stand in the spectrum politically on this issue, you have to realize that emission standards, and especially if you're in the manufacturing space, is going to be part of your life if it's not already in your organization. And you have to be aware of what the issues are, and you have to be able to deal with it from the business end of the machine in terms of what your company is doing. And that's, I think, is really important. We're going to touch on that again here towards the end of this piece in a few minutes. What I want to do, though, is I want to get to some really interesting comments. We got a lot of comments on this piece, Dirk, as we expected, and as I'm sure many of you expected. We had a lot of comments pro and con for this piece that we ran. I want to read a few of them to you, and we'll chat a little bit about what our interpretation is of what we got from these viewers, these readers. The first was from Jay Malloy, who writes, "Great article. The presentation of global warming data is an excellent demonstration of the necessity of objectivity in science. Lack of objectivity results in poor science. Whenever scientists adjust the data with inadequate explanation, the data become questionable and the conclusions drawn from the data are even more questionable." Excellent point, and it is all about that. It's about what conclusions you draw from the data and how the data is driven. A counter to that was from T. Mullen, who writes, "Day's article is clearly one-sided with respect to climate change and veers far off the subject of metrology. Comparing measurements in a controlled lab environment chamber to uncontrolled field weather station measurements is silly. Even data collected in highly controlled conditions can have problems, but field data is particularly problematic." Good point.
Well, yeah, yes and no. I mean, I would actually disagree with Mullen on a couple things. Anything related to climate change is dead smack in the middle of metrology,
Right.
because metrology is measurement, and what we're talking about is measurement science, the science of measuring the climate. And you use, as Ryan pointed out, there's a whole array of very sophisticated equipment from satellite observation to simple thermometers on the ground that are used for taking temperature. It's all about metrology. The other thing I would agree and disagree with him on is he says even data collected in highly controlled conditions can have problems, but field data is particularly problematic. He's absolutely right. There's a vast difference between taking measurements in lab conditions, environmental chamber conditions, and taking measurements out of the field. But that even points, to me, that points to the whole problem. This is very problematic data.
It is.
And the thing that nobody's really touched on in the comments is that everybody admits that there's bias in the data. And NOAA talks about it, Goddard talks about it, the University of East Anglia talks about it. It's known. I mean, and what they're trying their best, and I'm not a cynic with these guys, I really am. I am not. They're trying their best to take this data, which they know has bias in it, and manipulate the data, adjust the data to take the bias out, because you can't look at the raw data by itself. It doesn't make, by itself, it gives you a completely bad story.
Right, right. But this idea, this is the kernel of the problem that people on both sides of the debate have. It's like, who is the one that's doing the interpretation? Who's doing the adjustment of the data?
Right.
And that's a really big issue. You know, all of us, wherever you are in this debate, and almost everyone has a very strong feeling.
As a side, including Ryan. I mean, you said Ryan doesn't have a point. Oh, Ryan definitely has a point of view.
Well, I think he approached it not saying I'm going to prove this. He approached it saying, let me see what I can find and what's out there. And you know, there's thousands of studies. I mean, there are so many studies you can go through, and for anybody to say that, well, they were picked and chosen. Well, of course they are. We're not going to, you're not going to present an article with thousands of citations. It's just impossible. But the methodology of looking at it from a metrological perspective, looking at the measurement of science, the science of measurement, and saying how do we apply that to what this topic is, I think was valid. And I think it's something that we want to continue to talk about. Before we leave this topic, I want to, because we want to get to Jim, because we have a lot of things to talk to Jim about. But before we go there, I want to say to everyone out there watching and who has a strong feeling about this either way, please write us. You comment on the article as it appears again in qualitydigest.com, or just write us at qdl@qualitydigest.com. Let us know what you think, because what we'd like to do is in December we're planning to do a special issue of Quality Digest Daily, which is going to involve all of these issues of green issues, environmental issues, emission standards, carbon, cap and trade, a lot of these issues we want to try to involve in that. And I think we're going to have Ryan and perhaps yourself and maybe Taryn as well contribute some articles and some editorial on this. We want you to weigh in on that too. We want to know what you think, because we want to include it in, and we want it from the perspective of not politically what you think about this, but how it affects your day-to-day. As a quality professional working in a particular space, how does this issue affect what you do? How do you anticipate it's going to affect what you're going to do? Because we know it's going to be more important as time goes along. So please write us and let us know what you think on that.
Okay, terrific.
Cool.
Well, next up, we're going to talk to Jim Harrington here in just 1 second. Jim wrote an article this week called China, A Call to Action. Good news, improved wages and conditions. Bad news, poor quality and getting worse. And just a brief synopsis before we bring Jim on. Jim has spent 30 years back and forth in China. Jim has really firsthand seen what is going on with the tremendous industrial growth in China.
Unprecedented.
Unprecedented. And as Jim points out in the article, there's one really fabulous side of it, I think, is that it really has raised for, let's say, China on average, has really raised their quality of living, their standard of living, has really helped them increase their wages, which is great. You know, it's great for them. The downside of it is that what has been lost in this, or, well, not lost to us, but everybody sees it, but maybe the Chinese don't really appreciate it, is that quality has declined at the same time. And this is going to be, as Jim points out, this is going to become a bigger and bigger issue for China as time goes by. They've been competing on the cost level, and now they're approaching the point where they really need to start competing on the quality level. And Jim believes this is going to be not only an important issue for them, but I think, as he will tell us, it's going to be a difficult issue for them. So I won't talk anymore. Let's hopefully we have Jim Harrington available to us via Skype. Jim, are you with us?
I'm here.
Oh, terrific. Okay, and you can hear us okay?
You're coming in loud and clear.
Oh, awesome.
Thank you. Working at a high quality level. The rest
Thank
of
you,
us
Jim.
are.
Thanks for joining us.
Hey, so first of all, I mean, I think the first question, just to lead off with, is you seem to indicate, or you say in your article, imply in your article, that the U.S. consumer doesn't seem to really care, at least if they're voting with their dollars, they don't really seem to care that what we're getting from China is of inferior quality. I mean, you even quote the Chinese as saying, "Hey, what are you talking about? We're sending shiploads and shiploads and shiploads of products to you guys. You're buying them. You're shipping nothing back to us. We must be doing something right." Does the U.S. consumer really value price above and beyond quality and cost? What do you think?
Well, you got to realize that China, you're not buying product from China. You're buying product from Walmart, from Target, from Sears, from Cisco. The Chinese customer is Walmart and Target. It is not the consumer. And we all believe in quality, that we should meet our customer requirements. And the customer requirements is what they're filling. The question is, does the Chinese customers compete on price or on quality? And the answer is clearly it is not price, but not quality, but price. Do companies want to sell things that last for a long time, or do they want to come back and make another quick sale? And basically, if you look at the American consumer today, they really are looking at self-fulfillment, immediate gratification. They're not looking for that product that's that old faithful that's going to last. That they're looking for the newest and greatest and best that they're looking for. And as a result, what the customer is requiring from China is not high quality, but something that will last for a period of time and be replaced. And I think that what you're seeing is China is reacting to their customer, and the customers here in the United States are not really reacting to the high-end consumer. They're looking at the general population, which is that mid-range where the big sales are and the big money. And so we're driving the quality as the consumer rather than China not fulfilling the quality requirements.
So you're drawing this distinction between, and honestly, I'd never heard this distinction before, but it makes perfect sense. You're drawing a distinction between a customer versus a consumer, and you're saying, yes, for, if I understand you right, you're saying for China, the customer are the big buyers, you know, Walmart, Target, so on and so forth, and that's who they're selling to. And as long as those people are happy, it doesn't matter what the consumer, which is you and I, really think. Do I have that right?
You're right on, and just the opposite. The fact, if the consumer wants a red car, but the customer that comes to China says, "I'm going to order 1,000 black cars," China has to produce black cars. They can't produce red cars. So you know what they're doing is reacting to what the major consumers, the sellers, are asking for.
And why do you see? I mean, so you know, all of us know that right now, when we think of Chinese products, very often we think inferior. We think shoddy. We think of products that just don't meet the kind of quality that we would expect. Why do you think that the quality of the products coming out of China is inferior? Is nothing driving them to produce better quality?
The Chinese marketplace, and well, let's back up a little bit. Let's look at what happened to China right after the 1980s. Basically, the China manufacturing revolution started when U.S. opened the market to them by reestablishing their diplomatic relationships with them in 1980. My first trip to China was in 1981, and at that time they had many problems. The government managed most of the businesses. They had a very, very poor education system. They were overpopulated based upon what they could produce. They had an obsolete infrastructure, and they needed a great deal of hard money to build up their infrastructure. And certainly their currency was of no value outside the country. You couldn't even use their money outside the country. So as a result, they had to react to the situation they had. What did they do? Where was their competitive advantage? Well, their competitive advantage was in two areas. They had a competitive advantage in cheap labor, and secondly, Japan had moved out of the low-end product market, leaving it open to anyone. And as a result, this was a natural place for them to come in. Now, look at the amount of time it takes to establish any type of outside reputation. If you look at Japan, it took Japan after World War II 35 years before it established a reputation related to quality. So basically, the strategy that the Chinese government took at that time was not to focus on consumers, but to focus on the people that were delivering to consumers. Now, one of the first markets they went after was the toy market, and it's a good example. There is 8 customers for them for their toys. It's the big toy distributors, and it's much easier to sell to 8 customers than it is to billions of customers worldwide. And certainly the cost and advertising and promotion then is borne by somebody else completely. So this is truly where they went. If you look at what happened to Japan, it's a good example of what could do.
Well, Jim, let me jump in there and talk about a product that would be marketed directly to consumers, which is automobiles. And the Chinese automotive industry certainly is a burgeoning industry and is certainly growing very quickly. And their goal eventually is obviously to sell worldwide to a very discerning group of customers with a lot of competition in Asia, Europe, and the U.S. for that customer. So how are they going to adjust to the fact that they will have to step up their game in terms of quality to meet the requirements of that particular industry segment?
Well, if you look at what they did last year they produced 18 million automobiles. That's what they sold. That is more than any country in the world. And they actually was able to distribute them. Now, their primary distribution has been in Asia, because that's where they focused on it, and that's where they're trying to debug their whole system. Take the world's best car is pretty much accepted to be the Toyota. Toyota's first car, when they shipped into the United States, was a dismal failure. Would completely ruin their reputation. They only sold 958 cars, and they had to ship truckloads and boatloads back to Japan to get rid of them. And China's not going to make that mistake. They're building it up. If you look at what they're producing, the Buick, they're in Shanghai. They're manufacturing just outside of Shanghai the Buick, a beautiful car, and it's a high quality car, and it's very sought after throughout all of the Asian nations. Their tire manufacturing, they've captured the complete tire manufacturing operation. Why? Basically because of quality. So they can produce quality when the client is asking for it.
That actually, since we already touched on Japan a little bit, what actions do you think China needs? What actions do you think China needs to go through to get on track with quality? I mean, I guess can we? Is it fair to compare China today with, as you mentioned, Japan just after World War II? I mean, is this a comparable comparison? Are we going to see this huge turnaround in China as they start focusing on quality? I mean, what's your experience over there?
Well, certainly they looked very closely at Japan as a role model. And if you look at Japan's reputation before World War II, their reputation was very similar to what quality's reputation is in China.
Exactly.
Poor quality, disposable good. It's cheap if it comes from Japan. But still, they were able to sell enough to build a war machine that could compete very well against the United States. And so truly it was a profitable operation. And they saw that as a profitable operation to come in as a starting point. If you look at what's happening, yes?
Oh, Jim?
You started to say something?
Oh, no, I'm fine. Sorry. We lost you there for a second.
All right. So they said, we cannot afford to wait 35 years to establish a reputation. What we need to do is to immediately focus on where the money is, where you can come in. There's a low investment to come in the low end. It requires less capitalization. You don't have to focus on innovation, creating new products, developing new products, invest in the research and development. So that was their quick answer. Now, what's happened is it's been very, very successful. They're seeing increases in salary between 20 and 30% a year. And that's building up a economy within China now where there's a group of people that are saying, hey, we really want to buy foreign goods because they're higher quality. So you're building up now the demand within China to drive them into that new area. The other side of this, the same thing that happened to Japan, is you increase wages, you no longer can compete in that low-end market, and that's what's happening in China right today. They're setting up manufacturing facilities in Mexico. Why? Because they can get cheaper labor than they can get in China. Mm-hmm. They're going to Vietnam. And so what they have to do is now step back and say, we're going through an evolution. And I believe that really there is no such thing as best practices, international best practices. I see always three layers. There's that startup, the young company, then how you're going to develop a reputation for yourself, and there's a whole set of best practices for a low struggling company that's very different than from an IBM or an HP who has millions and millions of dollars in the bank that they can work with. So there's a whole set of best practices, and what they did is they focused on the best practices to get their manufacturing industry going. And with bringing up wages, now they have to transfer over, and they got to look at establishing themselves as some brand names where this is the Chinese product that's got a reputation for quality. And I think that's the next phase in their evolution.
Hey, Jim, we got a couple questions here from some readers. Mike, maybe you can help me on this one. I'm not sure I completely understand the question. Raj asks, or says, poor, lower middle, and middle class people are happy with China's quality. Are rich customers making quality expensive?
Well, I think what they're saying is, I think what he's saying there is that China produces products for outlets like a Walmart, for instance, which tends to have a lower economic strata shopping there. Okay. So I think what Raj is saying there is that perhaps those customers are perfectly satisfied with the quality. It is the more affluent customers that are demanding a higher level of quality, and maybe they don't shop at Walmart, and maybe this argument's not directed at them. Perhaps. Okay. What do you think about that, Jim?
Well, certainly, if you look at where the money is, and the major sales related to manufacturing, if you're trying to put people to work, it is in the low to medium range. The disposable product that you're going to only keep for a couple years. It's not in the car that's going to cost you $100,000. It's in the car that's going to cost you $20,000. And truly, that's where the low-end companies are working on. But really, that really isn't the low end. That's 80% of the population. That's 80% of the buying strategy is focused on that. Now, there's some luxury things that anybody looks at, and they go out and they look for brand names, and they'll buy brand names because of that. But it's the luxury items that is really driving the quality situation. You can't expect a startup company to use the same operating procedures that you see used at Cisco. It's a whole different operation. When you're fighting to stay in business, you're going to have to do different things and there's different priorities.
Okay, Jim, we got another question here. This one's from Steve. Jim, I'm interpreting your position as essentially good news for American producers. If China is hobbled by their business model of having to meet retailers' requirements, does this mean that American producers have an inherent competitive advantage in that we are not slaves to the retailers and have more flexibility to focus on brand quality?
Certainly, brand name quality is a driver at the high-end products, but it really is not the only answer. You cannot depend upon high-end products if you're manufacturing them out of the country. Now, we buy Sony, and I buy Sony because it comes from Japan. But more and more Sony is being manufactured in China or outside of Japan at least. And truly, if you're going to develop a strategy of high quality, you have to work with the country and start changing the attitude of the country itself.
Well, that's actually my next question. Is do you see that happening? I mean, we got to kind of wrap up our time here pretty soon, but I want you to be able to talk a little bit about what you're seeing going on in China. Do you see China coming around? Do you see a realization from them that they really have to get their act together on quality if they're going to continue to compete? Your premise is they can't compete on price alone any longer because their prices are going up because they're raising their cost of living. How is China going to tackle the quality problem, and are they even doing anything about it?
They are looking at establish some brands within their country, and you can look at it from the standpoint of what's happening in the solar and wind area, where they've now completely captured that market, and now they're really focusing on some very high quality products coming out of that area. You will see that a good example of what can happen and how people can change so fast is to look at South Korea. South Korea cars were nothing but low-end product. Today, they're producing quality that is much higher than GM can produce, and they did it in a matter of less than 20 years. So you can make a quick change around, but you take some time to build brand recognition. And you really have to change quality for at least one complete cycle where you're producing a high quality product before you get recognition, because customer perception is at least one cycle, if not two cycles of the buying cycle between when they change their perception of your product. And so there's a long time to change customer perception, and that's what China's got to invest in that longer cycle period. And they can do that by focusing on establishing their brand name within China before they try to go outside of China. There's a degree of loyalty to the country that I think it would be accepted much faster there than there will in other places. And
are they doing this? I mean, are you seeing the Chinese take an active effort in, I don't know, I'm not sure, maybe it's not the same culture, but kind of the quality management things that we're used to here in the United States, maybe that doesn't work in the Chinese culture, but is there something within their culture that they're using to motivate companies to start concentrating on quality? I guess that's the point I'm getting at, is what is actively taking place to make this change happen?
Well, very little, to be honest with you. And it's because how do you knock on a person's door and say you got to do things differently when they're the most successful country in the world? They've increased their gross national product greater than any other country. With only 19% of the world's population, they use 53% of the world's cement, 48% of the iron, 47% of the world's coal. They produce 11 times more steel than the United States produced last year. Currently, they have the world's fastest train and largest high-speed rail networks. They have a cash revenue of over $3.4 trillion. That's more foreign currency that they have than any other country in the world does.
So
it's the biggest single supply of money.
So what you're saying, Jim, is that kind of from their perspective, they think they're doing everything right. So there's really not a heck of a lot of motivation at this point to change.
Yeah, they have 90% of the rare earth materials in the world. 90%. And that's what's required to make all of your high-speed computers.
Yeah.
They have the fastest computer in the world. They have jumped from 15 years ago. They were 14th place in the number of technical breakthroughs that they had. Today they're second in the world. From their standpoint, the model that they have is working extremely well. And what you've got to get them to do is to look.
Oh, I think we lost your audio there for
Jim,
a bit.
did we lose you? Well,
oh, hold on one second. It's trying to reconnect. Well,
well, I think that was actually a good point to kind of end on. Is that they're happy. I think that they're satisfied. The Chinese, that they feel as though what they're doing is working just fine. We're getting Jim back, or
well,
it's trying.
It's trying. Yeah.
Well, anyway,
I'm back with you. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Okay, Jim. Actually, yeah, we lost you there for a second, but. We're just going to go ahead and wrap up. Thanks a lot for joining us on the show. So kind of to summarize what Jim was saying, is he's saying quality is an issue in China, but right now, because they're so successful and from their point of view doing very well, there's not a whole lot of motivation to make this change, but it's something they are at some point going to have to do.
Obviously, yeah. Especially they're going to get into some of these more affluent market sectors, and some of these more affluent product lines are going to want to have to do that, and we're going to have to press them on it too.
Okay. Well, Jim, thanks once again for joining us. Sorry.
One thing I like to end it from the standpoint.
Okay.
You know, we can say a lot of bad things about China and what they're doing, but one thing nobody will say is that they are stupid. They are very, very smart, and they are extremely good businessmen, and they really know how to increase their usage of labor and to increase their position in the world market. And truly, you know, we have to set in a position that we've got to change our requirements and the way we do business very significantly. They have a government system that I believe is much poorer than ours, but it's 90% effective. We have a much better system, but it's probably 45% effective. So truly, we have to look at ourselves as well as expect China to change.
Okay. Well, Jim, thanks for joining us. I know you're going to be going to China again, so we'll look forward to hopefully talking to you again after you come back from China and see what you learned on your trip there.
Absolutely.
So thanks, Jim, once again for joining us. We did get a few questions in, so thanks to all of you for emailing your questions to Jim.
Yeah.
So what's coming up? What's coming up next week?
Great segment. Well, next week or later on this month, we'll be having another guest on the show. Sabir Chowdhury is going to be on. He's going to be talking about his new book, The Power of Leo.
Okay.
Listen, enrich, and optimize.
That should be interesting.
Interesting conversation with Sabir. Later in the month, or perhaps early in November, we'll be having Keith Bevins of the National Physical Laboratory in the UK, who will be on to discuss the results of their measurement study at CMSC in Phoenix in July. So that'll be interesting as well. So
and also for you Mark Hamill fans, not Mark Hamill with the lightsaber, but the other Mark Hamill, one of our favorite bloggers. We're also just trying valiantly to work into Mark's schedule to get Mark onto the show. He's one of our popular writers, and we'll get him on here to talk to us as well.
Let us know if you like these. I mean, we want to continue to bring guests on the show and mix it up a little bit. So let us know who you want to see and if you have things you want to bring forward to. Before we close, we got a piece of fan mail.
Yes, we got
earlier today.
Fan mail from India.
From Delhi, India. We had a new friend of ours who wrote us and had some very nice things to say. We thought we'd share that with you. Dirk, we have that up on the. We're trying to get it up on the screen share right now.
Come on.
But this was a new reader, a new reviewer.
Hi, Mike and Dirk. I'm a new joiner, and I am amazed to find such a wonderful forum to know and discuss everything and anything happening in quality. I am from Delhi, India. I liked the September 23rd feed on Quality Expo and the recent one on the 10 Lies. Tonight, 10 Lies. That was
last week.
That was last week, right? Tonight I will try to watch you guys at my India time of 11 p.m. I hope my home internet connection will support the bandwidth. Thanks, Prashant. Prashant, well, I hope you're watching us right now live, and now that the show's over, you can go to bed and get a restful night of sleep.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Prashant. Thank you, everyone there, for joining us. Thank you, Jim, of course, for joining us as well. It was a pleasure having you on, and we'll look forward to seeing you soon. And we'll look forward to seeing you all soon as well. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week.
So long.